This is Lecture 2 for Class 4. We're going to explore how statutes are organized in a little bit more depth now. Statutory codes are divided into subject categories. Each category is usually called a title or chapter and deal with broad, logically organized areas of legislation. In the United States Code, these categories or subjects are called titles and are assigned a number. For example, Title 15 is Commerce and Trade. The laws dealing with commerce and trade are codified under Title 15. Note that until August 31st, 2014, we only had 50 titles. It ended with War and National Defense. Since then, we have added an appendix and Titles 51 and 52. The Hawaii Revised Statutes are also organized into titles and chapters. On the day I recorded this lecture, the Hawaii Revised Statutes were unavailable from their website. So I'm going to urge you to go to the law library and look at the Hawaii Revised Statutes to see how they're organized. Or return to capitol.hawaii.gov on another day when they're working. I think this illustrates to you why you need to know multiple ways to access your primary authority. Of course, you could see them on Westlawnext, but if you were keeping track of your costs, this might not be the most cost-effective way to do your research. As I said, statutory codes are usually organized by titles, and then they are divided into smaller parts. There usually is a title and a section, but it can also be divided into smaller sections like parts, subparts, chapters, subchapters, sections, subsections, paragraphs, subparagraphs, items, and sub-items. Depending on the complexity of the statutory citation, they may use all or just a couple of these divisions. I've diagrammed for you how a section of the Internal Revenue Service Code would look if you were breaking it down by section and subsection. I've taken this statutory citation and I've pasted that statute here on your screen. The citation is 26 United States Code Annotated, section 45B3A1. Why don't you take a moment and see if you can track that citation through this screen to find the law that it is citing to. It's citing to this last line here, little I, with the word grants provided by the United States. It's important for you to be able to read your citations and track them through these complicated statutory structures. Understanding the different parts of a statute can also help you with your online research, and we'll take a look at some statutes on Westlawnext. Both the United States Code and the Hawaii Revised Statutes have titles, chapters, sections, and subsections. I've diagrammed the citation to the U.S. Code Annotated here and to the Hawaii Revised Statutes. Even though they have similar structure, the citation is different. For example, a U.S. Code citation will have a title, followed by the abbreviation of the publication, and then the section and subsections. The United States Code does have chapters, but you do not cite to the chapter. In the Hawaii Revised Statutes, we cite to the chapter and the section. So, Chapter 510, which deals with community property, and Section 23 deals with the disposition of that property upon death. The odd thing about the Hawaii Revised Statute citation is that the entire citation is referred to as a section. So you see the section symbol in front of the 510 instead of the 23. The HRS does have titles as well, but you do not cite to the title when you're citing to the Hawaii Revised Statutes. Because of the complicated structure of statutory codes, many practitioners prefer to start their statutory research in print and then move online to update it and to use the editorial enhancements that make the annotated codes so useful. We're going to go on to Westlawnext now to see how we can leverage the tools on Westlawnext and navigate through the statutory codes. On Westlawnext, we can bring up the citation by typing it in the dialog box and hitting the search button. I just want to remind you, running along the top are some aids that can further your research. We talked about the notes of decision in class. These are highly selective cases that the editors from West have decided represent the case law on this particular statutory section. It doesn't represent all of the case law. All of the case law can be found in Citing References, and you see here there are 52 cases. Also, let me remind you that you can find other material helpful for your research under Citing References, such as your secondary authority, as well as Context and Analysis, which specifically highlights important ALR annotations and encyclopedia entries. These might be good starting points for you if you're unfamiliar with the area of law. What I really want to show you here, however, is the table of contents. Remember, we spoke earlier about the structure of a statutory code and how there are titles and chapters as well as sections. Here we see that this statutory section is part of Chapter 10A. Whenever you're looking at a statute, it's imperative that you look at the entire table of contents for the chapter or for the part if you're looking at a subpart. An easy way to do this on Westlawnext is to use the table of contents feature. Once we open it, you'll see that 375 joins its brothers and sisters at the table. We may not have been looking for the penalties under the statutory section, but if we're representing somebody who is dealing with a violation of this law, we certainly are going to be interested in knowing what the penalties are and how they're applied. You can easily maneuver section by section using the green arrows on top. So, if we wanted to go back to the original section 375, we can scroll this way. If I open up the table of contents again and I scroll up, I can see that Chapter 10A follows Chapter 10 and precedes Chapter 10B. This is another way to maneuver through the table of contents for a statutory code. The Hawaii Revised Statutes are also arranged by title and chapter, so we're going to take a look at one. This is the citation we used in the example showing you how to cite to the HRS versus the U.S. Code. Again, you can see how this statutory code section fits within the larger chapter and title by using the table of contents. This particular section has many more brothers and sisters, and so it's your job to read through them and make sure you're not missing any important elements of the law. In this example, we have parts. So underneath Chapter 510, dealing with community property, we have Part 1 and Part 2. Our section falls in Part 2. You shouldn't leave without opening Part 1 to see what it has to offer you. This concludes Lecture 2 for Class 4. Please proceed to Lecture 3. In Lecture 3, we'll talk about how to find a statutory code when you don't have a citation.